David has become this wonderfully important filmmaker around the world whose work is really understood. But you look back at Shivers and Rabbit, they really formed kind of the nucleus of his work, and all his sort of important thematic ideas are expressed in those movies. I started making films at McMaster University, which is in Hamilton, very close to Toronto. I went there in the music program. I thought I was going to, I always wanted to be in the entertainment business, whatever that meant. And I thought maybe, well, because I was in a music group and I was now studying for my Bachelor of Music, that maybe I'd be a film composer and I would learn how to do that. But while I was at McMaster, I started directing first plays, and then because there was a film board there that actually made films, I quickly became interested in that, and in fact directed my first short, a movie called Orientation, a comic movie which frankly had a lot of the precursors that led to Animal House. So, you know, I was growing up in Toronto. One of the people I got to know, of course, was David Cronenberg, and we got to know each other. And along with David Cronenberg, right in my own university, of course, were Len Bloom and Dan Goldberg, who became partners with me over the years, wrote Meatballs, Stripes, you know, Private Parts. Eugene Levy was in, and Marty Short were in school with me. I never ended up working with Marty, although we were friends, but Eugene Levy, you know, worked on Cannibal Girls with me, became the star of Cannibal Girls with Andrea Martin. So it was a small, somewhat incestuous group, and I think we all influenced each other. About this time, I met with Andre Link and John Dunning, who had a lovely company called Cinepix in Montreal, and we talked about perhaps sort of joining up and making films together. I spent a lovely couple of years there. It was fun, and I mean, Death Weekend I was very involved with. I was on the set. I ended up having sort of partially directed that movie because Brenda Vaccaro, who was one of the stars of Death Weekend, would not speak to the director because of various craziness, and so I was the go-between. And by this point, I was actually as experienced and more experienced than many of the directors that we were employing to direct the movies, and you know, had a knack for talking to actors in terms of sort of getting things done. It was a wonderful sort of free-form, kind of loose way of making movies for a tiny amount of money. But that movie, Death Weekend, turned out, I was the one who was always arguing against the Ilsa series. It was too disgusting, even for me. I remember saying, I have nothing to do with these movies. You can't put my name on these movies. I'm totally against these movies. I said, you know, I have relatives who are in the concentration camps. I just can't get behind this ridiculous exploitation. And they just went for it, and they became infamous for their rabidity. Cronenberg sent this script, The Invasion of the Blood Parasites. And I was a huge fan of that script, and really was part of sort of redeveloping it, filling it out, and sort of deciding with my partners, Link and Dunning, that we should make that film. And we ended up producing that film together. Shivers was controversial because it was so effective as a horror movie. And it really, it frightened people, it disgusted people, because like much of David's movies from that point on, there was this sort of strange kind of body functionality kind of weirdness that generally led to disgusting kind of imagery that really, nauseated a lot of people who would watch the film. And one of which I think was in a prominent magazine, I think it was Saturday Night or something. And I think his big comment was, how could this be a Canadian film? Because it didn't sort of fulfill what his criteria were for being a Canadian film. And I remember how nuts that made David and I. Shivers was a big success. We sold it at the Cannes Film Festival all over the world. And so we were looking for another perfect movie to make, and David wrote a draft of Rabbit, and I was already producing a show on Broadway called The Magic Show, which originated also in Canada, in Toronto. While I was preparing for that show in New York, I used to watch a cable channel in my little apartment, and it had naked interviews with celebrities. And one of the celebrities that was being interviewed one of the evenings that I happened to catch it was Marilyn Chambers. And we were just starting to put Rabbit together. And I remember watching Marilyn, and I found her sort of kind of really smart and very effective, at least in her interview. And I immediately phoned up David at the end of the interview, and I said, look, I got a crazy idea for the star of Rabbit. What about Marilyn Chambers? She had just done The Green Door and was sort of infamous for being that lovely girl next door who did the Ivory Snow commercials and then starred in a pornographic movie. And she just held herself perfectly, and I thought she'd be effective. And David agreed with me, and we called up John and Andre, and they said, sure, if we can make a deal. And we were able to make a deal. I can't even remember what she was paid, which was very little. But she became the star of Rabbit. I remember her showing up with the infamous Chuck Traynor, who a lot of books have been written about, who was her manager, I think even husband at that time. They came to my wife and I's home on Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving, and had dinner at her home because she was up in Montreal at this point shooting Rabbit. And she was perfectly poised, a lovely lady. She did a great job on the movie, as I remember, and there were no problems. And she was just really easy to direct. I did most of the music from a library. I may have written a theme, although I can't remember. I think I did it on Death Weekend, but I don't remember whether I actually composed anything original. I think I would go down to New York into the sort of historical, sort of 40s style music libraries where they had these large, long playing vinyl recordings. And I would sit there with a turntable and just needle drop quickly, and I would pull out a kind of a library full of stuff that I thought might be appropriate. And then I would transfer it into sort of a mag, because we were using a double system then. And I would sort of start to get a sound for the film. So I worked as a composer, but without actually composing the material. I would learn how to pull stuff from various sources and create a kind of unified musical sound for a film.
Was that Rose?
I think Rabbit was easier to market. For one thing, that poster was really a still that we had from the film, and I remember pulling it out and saying, wouldn't this be great? It was the frozen girl in the freezer, and I remember selling that to Roger Corman and going down and meeting with Roger. He was struck by that image as well, and he loved the title and stuck with the title, unlike American International Pictures, which put that goofy title on Shivers. And I think the Marilyn Chambers thing really helped market it. It did very well, and we sold it all over the world. David and I actually wanted to work together after Rabbit, and my company actually got the rights to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and quite a famous book that a lot of people had attempted to make films of. And I pitched David the idea, and he really liked it. And we met a number of times in Los Angeles about it. And just when he was getting serious to sort of go forward with it, because he was going to do the screenplay, and then Mel Brooks actually offered him The Fly. which Mel Brooks was producing. And The Fly was just a terrific idea, and I think it was the movie that really switched his career from being from being a relatively obscure Canadian director to a kind of an international director. So it was a great choice for him, but that was sort of the end of our sort of collaborative opportunities. I think what was wonderful about that period was that it was fast and loose. And I don't think I would have had the opportunity to have the start that I had if I had not lived there. I mean, just the fact that there was a government organization that was helping to fund films, that there were a few small Canadian distributors like Cinepix that actually, by its charter, had to invest in Canadian films to a certain extent. And the competition, the competition wasn't substantial and the talent was. And I think there was just this opportunity to work with really wonderful people. And really I took as my partners in all these movies people that I knew from growing up around me in both Toronto and Hamilton, in Montreal. And it was the basis for the start of my career.